So we're going to dive into the AFC North today with John McMullen, of course, longtime NFL writer and now Eagles and NFL Insider for 97.3 ESPN.com. And he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline as we look at the AFC North today on the Sports Bash. John, yesterday the Patriots were the definitive winners of the East. That we all agree on. But in the North this year, it seems like it's a little bit more difficult to find out who the favorite is. So let's start there. Who is the North favorite for you?
Well, I think you can make a strong case for three teams. So it's going to be a good competitive division. I think any of the three could win it. Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. It's strange to say that with the Browns, but all of a sudden, over the last few years, we know they've added significant talent. I think they're the most talented team in the division from top to bottom, the Cleveland Browns. Again, it's strange to say, but they do have to prove it. They do have to take a significant leap. They are unproven, haven't been in that situation, whereas Pittsburgh and Baltimore, and that's probably still the best rivalry in the NFL. I mean, they're time tested. Mike Gill, Jim Harbaugh, they know how to do it. So I don't think you can forget that part of the equation. But I do think it's going to be one of the more competitive divisions. And any of those three teams could win it. The only team that probably can is Cincinnati.
Yeah, and Cincinnati, obviously, with a new coach there finally, who knows what they're going to look like. But we'll get there in just a second. But let's take a look at the team that you picked, the Browns. And the Browns at the top, you got, in your opinion, in terms of the most talented roster, it starts with Baker Mayfield. Is he the real deal in your opinion?
Yeah, I think he is, but I also want to place a little asterisk on that in the fact that talk about it all the time. I mean, the NFL is a league that moves very slowly, and there's adjustments, and those adjustments generally come after the season, and that's what Pittsburgh and that's what Baltimore's coaches have been doing. They've been devising ways to stop Baker Mayfield, to make things more difficult for him. And there are going to be significant adjustments. They're going to see what he did well, and they are going to force him into some things that he didn't do well. So there has to be the counter, and that's what great quarterbacks do. They counter, and they make adjustments to the adjustments made to them. And that's what we don't know about Baker Mayfield. Talent-wise, you saw last year, he's got everything needed to be successful, but experience is a big part of it, and there's going to be some hiccups along the way, and we'll see how he handles it.
Yeah. You know, they went out and got, obviously, Odell Beckham, and that's a blockbuster move, which can help any quarterback, you would think. Is he the right fit for Mayfield? I mean, are those two guys you say, man, these guys are going to light up the scoreboard?
Yeah, I mean, I think talent-wise, Odell's the right fit for any quarterback. He's that type of receiver. His issues are off the field, sometimes on the field, how he handles specific instances and loses his cool. But we just mentioned talent, from a talent perspective, he's top 5. There's no question about it. So anytime you put that kind of difference maker on the field, and if he's going – and clicking on all cylinders, that's pretty good. And then you add to the fact Jarvis Landry is also there. And that might be one of the 2 or 3 best slot receivers in football. So when we talk about the talent they've been able to add, there's a perfect example at wide receiver. And they've gone about it in different ways. And they also have David Njoku at tight end. I mean, they throw high-level talent at you all over the place.
Yeah, they also have Chubb and Duke Johnson, and they brought in Kareem Hunt, who we don't know what the suspension will do there, as you mentioned, with Njoku and Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham. The biggest question, I guess, comes into this. You got a first-year head coach there with so many personalities and new faces in Cleveland that are all going to want the ball. How is Freddie Kitchens a first-year guy? Was he the right pick?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's another one. You have to wait and see. Obviously, Baker and him got along very well. That's part of it. You want a head coach when you have a young quarterback, you probably want an offensive-minded head coach. You didn't want to change the offense. Certainly, that's one of the worst things you can do with a young quarterback from year one to year two. So I think that continuity is helpful, but that's a big job, man. And everybody lived through it here with Doug Peterson, and you remember the narrative about how he wasn't prepared. It's sort of like a scaled-down version of being president. You can talk about, you can be a governor somewhere, you can be a senator, but there's no experience until you get the job, and you got to learn on the job. And that's what he'll be doing. But that's every first-time head coach. You're going to struggle with it because there are a lot of responsibilities that you didn't have when you were just a coordinator. And coaches talk about it all the time. A lot of it is time management and how you handle it, all these extra duties that you need to perform, things from meeting the media 3-4 times a week, to handling both sides of the football and dealing with the entire team and setting up schedules, logistics, just minutia that nobody thinks about.
Yeah.
Besides the X's and O's, it's a big job.
We also know that defensively, this is a team that last year was terrible tackling, and they've got some names over there. Myles Garrett, a guy they drafted, Olivier Vernier, they went out and got there. Sheldon Richardson, they brought in, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of question marks on this side of the ball. It could be interesting. That's another factor of, does the offense and the defense get along?
Well, yeah, I mean, hey, look, they're not proven, and that's what we said. But even on the defensive side of the ball, and it starts with Myles Garrett, as you mentioned, Olivier Vernon's a big name. They signed Sheldon Richardson, who's a really good player inside. Denzel Ward's a first-round pick. They got Greedy Williams, who's a high-level pick coming in this year. Morgan Burnett, Demarius Randall. These guys can all play. So that's where we said, from a talent perspective, this is the best team in the division.
Yeah.
From a coaching and organizational perspective, look, I think they're going in the right direction. I think John Dorsey finally has it on the right path. But you're talking about Freddie Kitchens, as we just mentioned, instead of Mike Tomlin, instead of Jim Harbaugh. Todd Monken is the offensive coordinator. He failed in Tampa. Steve Wilkes is the defensive coordinator. He failed in Arizona as the head coach. So maybe the question marks have more to do with those guys and how they do fit everything together.
All right, let's go to Baltimore and check out the Ravens, who, every year I think we go in, and at this time of the year we think the Ravens are going to be a playoff team. Harbaugh's there, and they typically are a very good defensive team. But this year's going to be different. Lamar Jackson, Mark Ingram is there now. They haven't had that big running back really since Jamal Lewis left there, I guess. The receivers have always kind of been light. I think you can be nice and say light is pretty kind because they don't have a great receiving core yet again. So, yeah, they got the running game now, but are they going to be multidimensional, this offense? This one's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it is, and I think it all hinges on Lamar Jackson, how much he takes a step forward, what he can do. Can he throw the ball consistently? Can he show the accuracy? They did draft Marquise Brown in the first round to help with the receivers. They also got Miles Boykin in the third round. So they know that was an issue. They've addressed it. They've got some really talented young players in. And we'll see how they shift their offense. John Harbaugh has said he knows he can't do it the way he did it last year. He knows he has to be more multidimensional. It's going to help to have, as you mentioned, a proven guy, Mark Ingram. They've had success at times, but it helps when you have a running back there that can at least offer you a little bit more consistency. And Greg Roman's the offensive coordinator. He's a local South Jersey guy, so and his reputation is really good with the run game. So that's still clearly the strength of that offense, no question about it. But they do have to throw the ball a little bit more consistently. Otherwise, they're going to see 8-man boxes, and it's going to get untenable for them.
Yeah, and they do have a pretty good offensive line there, so they can kind of it's something that you mentioned yesterday. Belichick said, "All right, you're going to run 215-pound linebackers at us. We'll bring in Mark Ingram, and we have a pretty good offensive line with Brown and Yonda." There's something they can possibly do there, especially with this quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be run first, and I talked about it with teams in the NFC East. That's not the position you necessarily want to be in the modern NFL. It's not to say you can't be successful. I think the margin of error is just a little bit smaller, but you can't always have what you want at every single position. So you got to maximize what you do have, and from that team offensively, the strength has to be the running game.
All right, John, defense is what everybody knows this Ravens team for, but is it going to be that way again this year? I mean, a lot of the big names that you remember are kind of gone. Suggs is gone. I mean, he was one guy that left. They brought in Earl Thomas, Tony Jefferson, but a lot of the names are not as recognizable on defense this time around.
Well, you start with, as you mentioned, Terrell Suggs is going to the Hall of Fame. But let's be honest, I mean, he's aging and he's at the tail end of his career, so it was probably time to move on anyway. It's not to disparage what he's done for that organization, but those are difficult decisions. And we always talk about it, better to give up a year early than a year late. It was probably time. The bigger issue is probably C.J. Mosley, still a really, really good player. Got the big deal from the New York Jets in free agency. That's going to be tough to replace, but, people will look at linebacker and say that's like running back on offense. That's the devalued position. So you got to make decisions. Do you really want to pay a linebacker what the Jets paid C.J. Mosley? Probably not. And I think, hey, Earl Thomas is there. We talk about Hall of Famers, Terrell Suggs. Well, Earl Thomas is arguably the best safety of this generation. He's coming off an injury again, so you have to be a little bit concerned. But that's a big-time playmaker on the back end if he's healthy. And all of a sudden you add him. You mentioned Jefferson. You also have Marlon Humphrey at corner, who's a former first-round pick. You have Brandon Carr, who's been a playmaker. Jimmy Smith, who's a first-round pick. So they have a lot of talent still on the defensive side of the ball.
John McMullen, we're looking at AFC North. Love this division. It's one of those ones that you just kind of intrigue. You always kind of keep an eye on because of that group of teams. And Pittsburgh's another one now. And by the way, Harbaugh's still the coach down there. And there was a lot of talk about him possibly leaving, but it seems that he's going to be firmly staying there because they made a commitment to a new quarterback with him. And it seems like, that they moved on from Flacco with Harbaugh. So does that say that you think Harbaugh's there for, I don't want to say the long haul, but at least an extended period of time, then more than we thought, let's say? Yeah,
he got an extension, so he's now back on sound footing, and it's the right decision. I mean, he's another Andy Reid acolyte. He's from that tree here in Philadelphia. The Eagles had tremendous interest in him for being a head coach if he could have gotten out of Baltimore over the years as well. You don't move on from coaches like that. I say it all the time. It's a cyclical sport. You're going to have ups. You're going to have downs. But the consistency as a whole, since he's been there and what he's been able to accomplish, and you just ask yourself, if you're going to move on from a head coach, are you going to be able to get a head coach that's better than Jim Harbaugh? And the odds of that happening are pretty low.
Yeah.
So I agree that and continuity. I mean, Pittsburgh, we're about to talk about, they've had 3 coaches in 50-plus years.
I'm just going to go to them.
Works in this league.
I'm just going to say, another team that doesn't have to worry about the coach typically changing, although maybe this year is a big year for him?
Well, I think we're in a sort of different age, social media age, where everybody's on Twitter every 5 seconds tweeting things right off the top of their head. So there's far more impetus, and people have already called for Mike Tomlin's job, which is amazing. If you look at his record, if you look at his success, the playoff appearances, It's silly to want to move on, but that's just sort of the generation we're in. So, yeah, if things go really, really badly, maybe the Steelers do shift gears. But I don't think they're going to go really badly.
No.
And I think a lot of people are expecting it to, because they lose Le'Veon Bell, they lose Antonio Brown. But remember, they didn't have Le'Veon Bell last year. They already replaced him. And James Conner was tremendous last year. So forget about Le'Veon Bell. Now, Antonio Brown, I mean, they're not going to be able to replace that kind of production. Arguably been the best receiver in football, certainly the most productive. But Juju Smith-Schuster's really good. Eli Rogers, good slot receiver. So they still have weapons. They just have to go about it a little bit differently on offense. I don't think they're going to be as explosive, but they're still going to be good. Yeah,
which is, as you mentioned, they got Connor, Juju Smith-Schuster, James Washington, Eli Rogers, the tight end. They always get production there. The line has gotten much better over the years. It used to be a very weak spot for them, but the line's decent with Villanueva and DeCastro, Pouncey. So Roethlisberger, when he's at the head, their offense should be pretty good. You look at their defense, excellent up front. I mean, Hayward, Hargrave, to it. I mean, this is a defense that typically has been their calling card here, but can this be one of the better defenses they've had the last couple of years? Because their secondary has been very poor the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I think the back seven as a whole has been poor over the last – they've kind of shifted. They went – obviously the Steelers of old were known for defense, but this group was known for the triplets and Ben and Antonio and Le'Veon.
Definitely.
They were offensive-minded. And one of the things, because of the Steelers' history, it was always – linebackers. They haven't been able to get consistency at that position.
Especially
but now
though in the league has changed so much where that position's no longer really where it was.
Yeah, but that's part of it. But they brought in and they traded up to get Devin Bush, and they think he's going to be a legitimate modern 3-down linebacker, and we'll see. Mm-hmm. T.J. Watt was pretty successful as a rush linebacker, so they're starting to get a little bit better. But, yeah, and then you talk about the secondary. I think that's the big question mark. You're still counting on Joe Hayden, and it's been 5 years since he's been in an elite corner in this league, and hoping Terrell Edmonds continues to develop. But I think when you look at the Steelers, you got to look at that back seven. It's got to get better. And a lot of it depends on how quickly Bush picks it up, because he's got to be that 3-down guy.
John, we know that the Steelers are disappointed every year they don't make the playoffs, but if they don't, that weakness this year, we just talked about that secondary being a weakness. But the one question that I would have is, you mentioned Schuster taking over for Brown. I guess to me a big question is, can he be the guy without Brown on the other side?
Well, no, I don't think he's going to be Antonio Brown. I think you understand there's going to be a little bit of a downtick there, and you do have to go about things maybe a little bit differently. But I don't think Smith-Schuster is the issue. He's going to be good. He's going to be productive, maybe not as explosive. But you got to find that second guy on the outside. Rodgers can handle the slot. The tight ends are good. I don't think you have you're not going to have as much as a problem there, but you need that second outside receiver. And they have a number of names. Dante Moncrief has never done it, so I don't know if you can count on him. They drafted Deontay Johnson, I think, in the 3rd round. He's got talent. They drafted James Washington last year in the 2nd round. He's got talent. One of those guys, I think, has to step up and at least be a compliment to Smith-Schuster.
Let's go to Cincinnati, and they're kind of picking up the rear here with the NFC North, and they're going to go with the same quarterback though, Andy Dalton. And I guess the one question would be, they got AJ Green, they got Tyler Boyd, those guys are pretty good. They got Mixon, they got Bernard, those guys are pretty good. Eifert's pretty good. Ross was a high pick. Can they surprise with this offense?
I don't think so, and it's not because of the skill people. I mean, especially if Eifert could ever stay healthy and got back to what he once was, which I don't know if you can count on. But When we talk about bad teams, and it seems to be the one theme that's consistent, it's bad offensive lines. And they have a bottom 5 offensive line. And the hope was that Jonah Williams could come in and solidify left tackle. Then you're off and running the first-round pick, and he's out for the year. So that was a crushing blow right away. And now that affects multiple positions, because now you have to kick Cordy Glenn back out to left tackle where he's not very good. They were going to play him at left guard most likely. And now somebody like John Jury, people might remember him from the Giants, or John Miller from the Bills, and they're just bad. So all of a sudden,
if you're taking a giant lineman, you're bad.
Yeah. And Bobby Hart is the other, might be playing at right tackle, another ex-Giant. So they might have 2 ex-Giants on the offensive line. Now, they have Billy Price, who was a first-round pick last year at center, and he's really good. And if Williams was able to play and at least hold down the fort, you could probably cobble together the other 3 positions, because those 2 guys are so talented. But that Williams injury, I can't even express how devastating that was short-term for him, because that offensive line is going to be a disaster again.
Another area that's a disaster, their linebackers last year were brutal. Atkins got hurt. Dunlap's a good pass rusher. The secondary's kind of weak with Kirkpatrick and Denard, Bates, Williams. I mean, it seems that even if they do have a good offense with the skill position players and somehow the line can get together, they got problems on defense all over.
Yeah, a long way from what they were about 5 years ago when Mike Zimmer was still there, and they had that dominating defense, and that's what we talk about, cyclical. They still have Geno Atkins. That's the one guy you can count on. He's right there with Fletcher Cox when you start talking about interior players in this league who might be number 2 behind Aaron Donald. So he's still really good. So they can get some things done up front, but you're right, that back 7, it's not good.
No.
And I don't see a lot of answers, to be honest, especially at linebacker. Now, we keep talking about it. It's a devalued position. You only need 2. So maybe Preston Brown can hold down the fort. Certainly as a 2-down linebacker. Got to find somebody else. And then other than Drake Kirkpatrick and William Jackson, who have the pedigree, they're both former first-round picks, but they really Kirkpatrick at times has lived up to it, but not consistently. I don't see the consistency there. And then the safeties are unproven. But, hey, this is the NFL. It's not like they're not talented guys. I think Bates was a second-round pick, and Sean Williams was either a second or third-round pick, somewhere in that range. So it's not like they're just rolling out guys who can't play and who don't have talent. But there's a lot of unproven players on the back end. And generally, when you have that many questions, you don't answer them all at once.
It is our previews, AFC North today, tomorrow the South, Thursday will be the West, and then on Friday we'll look at the conference as a whole, the AFC. Next week we'll get into the NFC, and then we'll be right up to Eagles training camp at JF McMullen. Follow him for all the NFL and Eagles news that is going to be coming quickly towards us as training camp is here in 16 days from now. John, we'll talk to you tomorrow, pal.
Yeah, and real quick, everybody go to 973ESPN.com. We started the training camp previews today with the quarterbacks.
Quarterbacks are up. QBs are up. Take a look at that right now. And his article on Brandon Graham, 10 years of Brandon Graham in Philadelphia. Thanks, pal.
All right, it's mine.